Welcome back to The Place of Places, a deep dive into William Saroyan's 1972 memoir, Places Where I've Done Time. Now we discuss Chapter 2, Joaquin Miller's Hillside Cottage in Oakland, 1912. This story takes place when the Saroyan kids were living at the Fred Finch Orphanage in Oakland. William's father, Armenoch, had only just suffered fatally. Unable to support her children in Fresno, Takui moved them into the orphanage while she worked as hired help in San Francisco. She visited the children in Oakland on weekends. This chapter is very brief. In it, 4-year-old William grills his brother Henry about a field trip to meet a local legend in Oakland, the poet Joaquin Miller. Henry is 7 years old in 1912 and tells William that only the big boys were allowed on the field trip. Henry describes Miller as very old, has a long beard, lies on a couch, doesn't want to see little boys. Henry and a dozen other kids were brought to meet the poet, and Henry tells William what happened there. Joaquin Miller asked them each their names and encouraged them to plant trees. Miller would die the next year in 1913. Who was Joaquin Miller? Saroyan gives a pretty good summary of the man in few words, but here is a longer biography. Joaquin Miller was born Cincinnatus Heiner Miller in Indiana in 1841 or 1837. This fact seems to be disputed, and it is only the first odd fact in a colorful libertine life. That he was not born with the name Joaquin causes young William to label him a fraud and a phony. Early on, Miller took the name Joaquin after the Mexican bandit Joaquin Murrieta. Miller married and divorced multiple times, was accused of neglecting his children, and was generally of shaky moral character, according to his peers. He was a Pony Express writer, lawyer, judge, teacher, gold prospector, adventurer, politician, and author. When he moved to Oakland in 1886, he purchased land that he turned into an artist retreat and coordinated the planting of 75,000 trees, including Monterey pine, Monterey cypress, olive, and eucalyptus. After this story takes place in 1919, Oakland purchased part of Miller's land, and the Joaquin Miller Park was established, to be expanded over the 20th century. The park's trails connect to Diamond Canyon Park, which happens to be another place in Saroyan's book. Miller was known as the poet of the Sierras, the mountain range that John Muir and others made famous, and that the Sierra Club would come to protect beginning in 1892. Miller's cottage was called the Abbey and remains in Oakland as part of the Joaquin Miller Park. The cottage was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1962. William doesn't seem to be a particular fan, even at age 4, and it so happens that Saroyan's literary idols, Sherwood Anderson, Walt Whitman, Mark Twain, and Ambrose Bierce, felt pretty ambivalent and often negative about Miller's writing and personality. His writing was first celebrated in England, but then lost favor there and was never much respected by the literary community in California. He was more a strange character, an iconoclast, than respected poet. In this story, Miller tells the boys that he planted 1,000 eucalyptus trees all over the Oakland Hills. A side note and public service announcement on this: the eucalyptus was introduced to California in the 1850s from Australia. The trees are invasive, and because of their oil, prone to catch fire, which, as we know, is a problem in California. Not very useful as lumber for construction, the eucalyptus quickly became ornamental, and then it was widely used as windbreaks and to soak up water in wetlands so that the land could be used to farm. Invasive coastal eucalyptus trees may have adverse effects on the local ecosystem, and they grow profusely in the fog. So Miller's boasting was actually probably another terrible environmental decision made in California in the 1800s. In 1991, the tunnel fire in Oakland Hills destroyed 3,000 homes and killed 25 people. Since then, East Bay communities have received fire prevention grants to thin or remove eucalyptus from the region. So, thanks, Joaquin. The poem titled Columbus that William references is about Christopher Columbus sailing to North America, written in 1892 by Miller, to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Columbus's landing. Saroyan mentions it was still taught in schools in 1969 when he was writing this book, and a quick search shows that it is still taught in some elementary schools today. One phrase that sticks out as very specific is when William tells Henry that he would never have given Miller his real name if asked. He says, "If you ask me, I would have said Puddin' Tame. Ask me again, I'll tell you the same." Henry tells him that you can't say that to an old man. This phrase is an old one, dating back to the 1600s, but it was used mostly by children as a sort of way to check if another child is part of the in-group. It would have been considered rude to say to an adult. One theory about the phrase is that a writer in the 1600s wrote a character called Pudding of Tame, who was a proxy for the devil, and that name stuck in children's rhymes from England. It's a bit of a wisecracky, fiendish thing to say to someone, and Saroyan was no doubt showing some puffery to the older kids. The phrase is still around, albeit somewhat rare. Here it is popping up in a 1994 hip-hop song. Why did Saroyan write this chapter? Well, it's a little slice of life from a bygone era, and evidence that Saroyan never suffered fools, showing that he was assessing character for a long time. And though he loved humanity, he always had a healthy skepticism of famous people that lasted a lifetime. Let's put this on the Saroyan map and move on.